This is the Steve Orlins teleconference with National Committee on U.S. China Relations for Friday, April 13th, 2012 at 2:30 p.m. Central Time. Excuse me, everyone. We now have our speakers in conference. Please be aware that each of your lines is in a listen-only mode. At the conclusion of the presentation, we will open the floor for questions, and at that time, instructions will be given if you'd like to ask a question. I would now like to turn the conference over to Steve Orlins.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Steve Orlins. If you don't know, I'm president of the National Committee on U.S. China Relations. Maybe you shouldn't be on this call. We've held these conference call discussions now for several years, and I have to say we've never had a response like we have for this one from our membership. Posted about 36 hours ago when we've had over 100 people sign up to listen in. You know, the events that have kind of generated this interest are some of the most interesting and I would say some of the most important that have come out of China in decades. The implications for leadership transition, for rule of law, ferreting out corruption, as well as for U.S. China relations need to be analyzed. Needless to say, we're thrilled to have America's foremost experts on elite Chinese politics with us today. People always, when I'm in China, they say, you're a Zhongguo Tong. What I think that really means is I just know who to call when I need a question answered. And on leadership politics, it's Cheng Li. He is the expert's expert, a great friend both of mine and of the National Committee. Before beginning, let me just make two announcements. One is I want to thank the Star Foundation that provides the funding for these calls. And second, to say that this call is actually on the record. And if you quote Cheng Li, and there are a lot of journalists I know on the line, if you quote him, I would appreciate if you also mentioned that he was on a conference call that was organized by the National Committee on U.S. China Relations. So some mention of the National Committee would be deeply appreciated. But many thanks to Cheng for doing this and giving so willingly of his time. And let me turn it over to him.
Well, thank you very much, Steve, for your very generous introduction and for moderating this discussion. I'm honored to share my thoughts on the unfolding Bo Xilai drama with the distinguished members of the National Committee and with the journalists. Now, in the next 25 minutes that are assigned to me, I will address three main questions. First, what is the Bo Xilai episode all about? Second, why was Bo Xilai able to stay in power for so long? And what does his fall mean for Chinese elite politics? And thirdly, what can we expect for the future? What are the likely charges against Bo Xilai? And what are the implications for China's political trajectory in general and the leadership transition this autumn in particular? Now, before answering these three questions, I would like to spend a minute offering my overall assessment. I believe that the dismissal of Bo Xilai is a very positive event in China's political development. While it has already constituted the most serious political crisis since the 1989 Tiananmen incident, and one may even say since the 1971 Lingbiao incident, the Hu Wen administration might have successfully avoided an even greater crisis in the making. Now, it should be noted that one of the profound differences between the 1989 Tiananmen incident and the recent Bo Xilai crisis is that in the later case, at least so far, China's economy and society have been hardly disrupted. This reflects the maturity of the Chinese society and the strength of the country as a whole. Now, to a great extent, this crisis is a good thing for China. It not only reveals major flaws in the Chinese political system, but may also help the Chinese leadership, intellectual communities, and the general public reach a new consensus, therefore contributing to bold and genuine political reforms. If the leadership fails to seize this great opportunity, the Chinese Communist Party will be in greater jeopardy in the years to come. Now, that's my my overall assessment. Now let me address the three main questions one by one. First, what is the Bo Xilai episode all about? Here I want to challenge three prevailing interpretations in both China and abroad. The first interpretation is that it is all about factional power struggle. Second, it is all about Bo Xilai's egotistic personality and his notorious ambition. And the third, it is about ideological conflict. Each of these views has some truism, but none of them, nor a combination of them, adequately tells the whole story. Bo Xilai, for example, has a very strong factional identity. He is a heavyweight in the princeling faction, comprised of leaders with high-ranking official backgrounds. He was a protege of Jiang Zemin and was very much backed by other princelings in their competition with members of the Chinese Communist Youth League faction, headed by Hu Jintao. Now, Bo Xilai was also notorious for his political ambition. People on the streets throughout China, which actually is a Chinese expression, seem to recognize Bo Xilai's political ambition in his self-promotion campaign that focused on obtaining a seat on the next Politburo Standing Committee. Many, especially other political leaders, also knew that Bo Xilai's ambition would not stop there. He wanted to become premier, as one of his staff members told foreign guests in November. Actually, I heard this story twice from different delegations to China in November. One of Bo Xilai's advisors, a professor named Su Wei, at the Chongqing Party School, was quoted first in the Chongqing media and then the national media last September as saying that, I quote, Bo Xilai and the Chongqing Mayor Wang Qifan look like the team of Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai. Now, Bo Xilai's arrogance was truly remarkable in Chinese politics and culture, which has the saying, leaders should be afraid of being high profile, just like pigs are afraid of being fat. Now, well, I don't know whether it's appropriate to say that or not, but it's a Chinese saying. Now, Bo Xilai also represented a new social movement that has a distinct ideological stance that the Chinese liberal intellectuals call Red Terror. Whether or not Bo Xilai should be considered a political opportunist, as I think he should, he explicitly called for a return of the Maoist era, appealing to a current of egalitarian and nationalist sentiment in the country. This is what has been known as the Chongqing model. Now, in my view, these three interpretations are relevant, but not crucial to understanding this unfolding Bo Xilai crisis. The real crisis has more to do with the situational factors, such as the truly exceptional cases of the attempted defection of Wang Lijun, the police commissioner, and the murder charges against Bo Xilai's wife. At the end of the day, this is a crisis for the CCP leadership as a whole. It is a crisis that strikes the very legitimacy of the CCP rule. The Chinese public has been shocked by both incidents. How could it be possible that a national hero such as Wang Lijun and one of the top leaders in the PRC and Bo Xilai would be capable of such actions? Now, this is what the ongoing Bo Xilai crisis is all about. The stakes are very high, and the challenge to the CCP leadership is intimidating. Now, this leads me to the second question. Why was Bo Xilai able to stay in power for so long? And what does his fall mean for Chinese elite politics? Now, to better understand or to better answer this question, we need to go back to factional politics with the tensions between the princelings on the one hand and the Hu Jintao Wen Jiabao administration, especially the Youth League faction, on the other hand. Now, leaders with princeling backgrounds have always used Bo Xilai, although probably none of them really trusted Bo Xilai. Bo Xilai has a nickname which is called Cannon, 大炮 in Chinese. He was always ready to attack his political rivals, especially Premier Wen Jiabao. On the other hand, Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabao saw Bo Xilai very much as a liability to their political opposition, namely princelings. They believed that Bo Xilai's personality his role as a force to divide, not to unite, and his Cultural Revolution-style campaign were doomed to failure. Now, these two factors help explain why Bo Xilai was able to stay in power for so long. It is also important to know the social forces for and against Bo Xilai. In my view, Bo Xilai had three major groups of supporters. First, let me very quickly mention this. First, left-wing intellectuals, the so-called New Left, which includes many ultra-nationalist opinion leaders. The second group consists of some princelings. I use the term some, not a majority of princelings, because many princelings also saw Bo Xilai as a liability. Some princelings share Bo Xilai's sense of entitlement, the notion of what I call the red nobility, and the same political and economic interests. The third group included the dissatisfied public, who were inspired by Bo Xilai's egalitarianism, Bo Xilai's crackdown on the mafia, and by the fact that Bo Xilai seemed to be a capable leader who could get things done. Now, on the other hand, Bo Xilai had four groups of enemies. First, liberal intellectuals never liked Bo Xilai, and the middle intellectuals often regarded him not only as a Maoist, but also as a Nazi-like leader, who often singled out particular social groups as targets. The second group of Bo Xilai's enemies consists of the lawyers and other legal professions who have been very critical about Bo Xilai's contempt for the rule of law in Chongqing. Most noticeably, the distinguished legal professor He Weifang was a leading critic of Bo Xilai, and he really very, very courageous man. And in the past 2 years, launched open criticism of Bo Xilai and Wang Lijun. Now, the third group consists of a majority of party elites, including military leaders, who believe that Bo Xilai did not play according to the rules, or the Chinese Communist Party rules, and that he would lead the party and also the country to trouble. Now, their opposition to Bo Xilai was evident in the multiple so-called intra-party elections since the 13th Party Congress in 1987. Actually, in China, the Chinese Communist Party, there were some kind of limited elections. They would eliminate those people who did not get enough votes, usually the very bottom 5 to 10%. Now, Bo Xilai failed to be elected to the Central Committee 3 times over these past 20 years. The fourth group who opposed Bo Xilai or considered as the enemy of Bo Xilai comprises a majority of entrepreneurs, both in China and abroad, who were deeply concerned or worried about Bo Xilai's style of populism and his anti-market tendencies. For example, he closed Walmart, 8 Walmart in Chongqing, and etc. Now, the second part of the second question, what does this fall mean to Chinese elite politics? Evidence seems to suggest that the party leadership has united on the Bo Xilai case. Regardless of what factions these leaders belong to, no one will side with Bo Xilai on any of these very serious charges. Confronting these grave challenges to the legitimacy of the party, the top leadership has all the incentive, in my view, to unite. Also, I believe that the balance of power between princelings and the Youth League has largely remained intact. This is most evident in the fact that the Bo Xilai's replacement is Dang Dejiang. As we know, Dang Dejiang is also a princeling and as a confidant of Jiang Zemin. So again, this is an indication that the sum of the deal has been made and the balance of power has largely remained. Now, the likely charges against the Bo Xilai are very severe and may include, I have a long list, but I don't know whether some of them will be used or whether all of them will be used. Now, for example, establishing a politically independent kingdom in Chongqing, interfering with official investigation, attempting to split the top leadership, bargaining other leaders' conversation. These are things actually he did when he was mayor of Dalian, many years ago. Paying left-wing intellectuals to spread rumors and engaged in personality assassination against other leaders, using terror and torture in Chongqing in the so-called crackdown campaign, engaging in corruption involving both Chinese and foreign companies, and most severely or most seriously, conspiring in the murder of British businessman Neil Hayward. Now, as of now, the purge of Bo Xilai's confidants and followers is continuing in Chongqing and Liaoning, but I hope that it will not be too excessive. Now, there's an urgent need on the part of the Hu Wen administration to regain public confidence and to make the political succession a more institutionalized process. Now, the leadership, both the fourth and the fifth generation leadership, should more boldly, in my view, pursue political reforms to ensure the survival and the revival of the CCP rule. This is not something they will do later, in a few years later, or the second term. They should do now, in the coming months. Now, specifically, they should not only handle the Bo Xilai case through the legal channels. They should not only handle the Bo Xilai case through the legal procedures, but should also take the opportunity to really promote legal reforms, rule of law, and eventually constitutionalism. Now, so they should also realize that the only way to reduce the power of sensational and the fake rumors, there are a lot of rumors spread. You know, it's really China entered a season of rumors, we know. The only way to reduce this kind of rumor is to allow for a more open official media. And the people will turn to official media for answers and for questions, and rather than just social medias and etc. And finally, they should adopt a more electoral mechanism in their selection of senior leaders at the upcoming 18th Party Congress. Now, let me conclude by saying that there are reasons for optimism, namely the emerging political discourse in China for a more transparent and more accountable government, Wen Jiabao's promises, and some other leaders also made promises for fundamental reforms in the party and the state leadership, and most importantly, the growing maturity of the Chinese society. Now, let me stop here and ready to answer your questions.
Cheng, that was terrific. That was both thorough and I guess surprisingly optimistic.
Well, yes. When people become pessimistic, I become optimistic. I was, as you know, that I was very pessimistic before Bo Xilai case. I argued in the past 2 years in the public occasions that China was going to have a major crisis. You know that I said it repeatedly in many occasions. Mm-hmm. But now that crisis certainly already took place, and there's good chance they can overcome that crisis and moving towards good, right direction.
Take us from before. You put a lot. You kind of start somewhat at the attempted defection, and you use that as kind of the touchstone for where the events spiraled out of control. But talk more about what caused the attempted defection.
Well, you mean Wang Lijun's defection, right?
Yes.
Well, the reason is quite clear. Wang Lijun thought that, rightly or wrongly, that Bo Xilai would kill him. So he becomes so desperate, and the only way to save his life and his family's life is to make the story internationalized. So in my view, he did the right decision to go to the Chengdu consulate. And early on, people also, the rumor said that he also went to the British consulate in Chongqing. I don't know whether it's verified or not. But whether
why at this point in time?
Well, of course,
he had just been removed as, he'd been moved from police chief to head of the education bureau of Chongqing.
Yes.
What had happened that caused this decision of his, and wasn't there already a political struggle that had begun, and that's what caused it? So, in fact, when you dismiss, his notorious personality as the reason for Bo Xilai's notorious personality and his kind of going outside of the parameters of what Chinese officials can do. When you say that's not the reason, in fact, when you go to before the attempted defection, it is already started.
Oh yeah, certainly it was evident that there's an investigation going on, and in terms of the Wang Lijun's own problem back in Tianjin, and also that Neil Hayward's death, both probably the more cases under investigation, and so this is the reason. Particularly the second case, the Wang Lijun also realized that the case, but there's something missing. According to some of the official accounts, sounds like Wang Lijun wants to challenge Bo Xilai. That did not make sense to me, because this is really it's quite unusual, that because the entire career of Wang Lijun really depends on Bo Xilai. How could you explain that kind of defect? But he did know it must be something else happening. But Wang Lijun did have the bit fight with Bo Xilai regarding that case, and also that he thought that 11 of his own men, including police and the drivers, were arrested or even killed, whether it's wrong, just a false impression, or it's real happen. Then he thought that he was in imminent danger. Now, again, you can imagine that the real questions that probably you want to ask, whether the investigation started much earlier, and or maybe organized by top leaders, maybe Hu Jintao, Wen Jiabao. We do not have sufficient evidence on that. But on the other hand, there are a lot of corruption cases under investigation. Certainly, Gu Kailai was involved in some corruption cases going on. But in terms of the death of the British businessman, that investigation, when did it start and how it started, we still do not have sufficient information. And there's something missing here.
Does it relate in part to the head of the party and disciplinary commission being a former party secretary of Chongqing?
Well, you mean He Guoqiang?
Yes.
Well, of course, he has been in charge.
Been happy that
yes.
This Dahe, there is this going after corruption in Chongqing when he had previously been the party secretary.
Absolutely, this could be the explanation, but we do not have sufficient evidence, because He Guoqiang is one of the 9 standing committee members, and also his leadership portfolio is in charge of party discipline, so he's entitled to do this kind of investigation. But this is an extremely sensitive case, and it's, in many ways, it's a very dangerous case, as we know now. So we do not have sufficient information at the moment. I hope that the story unfolds, that we will have better information.
2 questions, and then I'm going to open the floor to questions from the listeners. One is, you say you hope the purges aren't excessive. How many have been purged up to now, and what do you mean by excessive? And then the other side of that coin is, we saw a number of trials, and we saw torture, and we saw other abuses of the legal system. Should we expect reversals of judgments, release of prisoners, and kind of reversals of asset appropriations?
This is 2-part question. The first one, so far, those who are arrested, it's only just a handful, including Zhang Xiaojun, the person who worked in Bo Xilai's family, and his wife. And Bo Xilai certainly is under house arrest, and some of the business people and related with corruption cases also under arrest. And so not many, including, early on, people talk about Wang Qifan. At least now, Wang Qifan is still a mayor of Chongqing. That's a clear indication. They do not want to touch too many people, and at least for the time being. In the future, I only express my view that I hope that it will not be excessive. And will not end up with another kind of cultural revolution campaign. That's the things that Bo Xilai was famous for. I think should use a legal procedure. And some of the left-wing intellectuals, the new left, if they are not advocate violence, I think they should not be in jail and etc. Now, in terms of the second part of the question, that certainly under the leadership of Bo Xilai and also Wang Lijun as the police chief, there are a lot of terrible cases. Some are already proved to be a false charge. And within few months, when Wang Lijun became police chief, they arrested hundreds of people. Some people said that even more than 10,000. This number is not verified, but it's large scale purge. This is when after Wang Lijun became police chief in Chongqing, and they also executed some of the so-called corrupt officials and even some business people. Now this is awful, and I think each and every of these cases probably will be revisited. Some of the false charges certainly will be changed.
But by the way, one very quick question: what do you make of when the Xinhua put out the announcement on Bo's wife, and they called her Bo Gu Kailai? What did that mean? Using both the married name and the maiden name together, which is something I have never seen in the PRC.
Yeah, right. This is actually probably have two messages. I tend to think one. One is that certainly it's implied or even explicitly link Gu Kailai with Bo Xilai, constantly remind people that Bo Xilai is the person behind. Now, but I tend to go with the second interpretation, that when you have this kind of name, it's implied that the person has a foreign passport or kind of foreign ID or green card, whatever. This is the way that for those who have citizenship in United States, in Singapore, and in Hong Kong, and UK, and etc. I think the second message is probably more important than the first one, and I think we will soon know what that means from the Chinese official source.
Let me allow our members to ask questions. So, Jeff, if you can announce the first questioner.
Certainly, sir. Thank you. At this time, we will open the floor for questions. If you'd like to ask a question, simply press the star key followed by the 1 key. Star 1 on your touch-tone phone now. Questions will be taken in the order in which they're received, and if at any time you'd like to remove yourself from the queue, you can just press star 2. Again, that's star 1 to pose a question. Our first question comes from Paul Eckert from Reuters News Agency.
Thank you, Dr. Li, for your sharing your wisdom for us on this Friday evening. My question is twofold but related. Is Bo Guagua, the couple's son studying here at Harvard, is he in any danger in any way, legally or otherwise? And more broadly, is China likely to take a second look at the number of sons and daughters of officials who are studying abroad at very expensive universities that would seemingly be beyond the means, the means to support on an official salary? Thanks.
Well, first of all, that at this point, the charge certainly was not made against Bo Guagua. And when he went to UK, he was only, a teenager. And but on the other hand, that a lot of attention will be given to Bo Guagua, and someone even said there's a rumor that he already left the United States. But based on my information, he's still at Harvard. And certainly, it's on the personal level, it's a tragedy, and for a young man. And but on the other hand, I think that he will be just like his family under some investigation. But the question here is whether he will ask for political asylum. We do not know in the United States, because this will cause some issues in the U.S. China relations. And also that there's a widely spread rumor that, again, this is a rumor, not verified, about Gu Kailai had a foreign account as much as 8 billion Chinese yuan. Now, that's a huge amount, and if it's in some countries, that also Chinese government wants to get the money back. Now, this is probably something later, but certainly related with Bo Guagua and related with the Bo family, and also have an impact to China's foreign relations. Now, in the second question, and the sons and daughters of the princelings. Now, this is a widely spread phenomenon. I don't think the Chinese leadership should change that and have a crackdown about this phenomenon, because some of the leaders' children probably really come abroad through the normal channels, and some are not corrupted. Of course, that you can doubt about this statement. But if you really undermine the entire elite class, you will really lead the country in a very disturbing political crisis. It's far more than just a purge of Bo Xilai. I think it is for the sake of stability. I think that the leadership will limit the purge and certainly will not target the children of the leaders. But on the other hand, I think that the phenomenon of reprinting certainly is on the spot. I think sooner or later that the leadership need to give explanation and also should introduce more regulations, more rules to deal with that phenomenon. But at the moment, probably we will not touch that. That's a very sensitive issue, and to a certain extent, less important than the other daunting challenges.
Next question. Thank you. Our next question comes from Susan Shirk from University of California. Well, it looks like she has removed herself from the queue. We are holding for questions. Our next question will be from Joseph Batat from World Bank.
Hello, Cheng Li.
Yes, Joe.
Yeah, thanks very much for your presentation. I really appreciate it. I have a two-part question for you. One is, as you mentioned, Bo Xilai essentially really took a red position in the political ideology, and then he wanted to have people to move towards some Maoist kind of ideological path. But the question I have is the following. Did that resonate among a certain part of the population, particularly the disenfranchised part of the population, and would his arrest be a backlash on that part of the ideological front? That's the first part. The second part of the question is, you're absolutely right. I totally agree with you about your suggestion of the political and media reform at this point. But how likely is it to take place in a political transition period that we are in right now in China? Thank you.
Well, both are very good questions. I think that for the first one, I think leadership does need to be aware of possible backlash, because to a certain extent, the dissatisfaction and the public is real, and also the criticism about the leadership in terms of ineffectiveness, and also the concept of harmonious society actually went nowhere. That kind of criticism also quite strong. And the middle class is also quite unhappy with various issues such as official corruption and the state-owned enterprises monopoly. Also the possibility will exert property tax, which really hurts the middle class. Now, these are widely spread concern or dissatisfaction in the Chinese society. And also, despite that Bo Xilai's kind of socialist or Maoist movement may come to an end, but the ideas, some of the issues will remain, and the so-called new left movement will probably find a new leader, and this kind of issues will not be over. But that's why the backlash could be overwhelming. So it is important to point out the model that in many ways contrasts with Chongqing model, is so-called Guangdong model. Actually, people also do not talk about that. Particularly Bo Xilai's rival Wang Yang in Guangdong become relatively silent, largely because of concern about the backlash. Now, this kind of thing certainly will make leadership very much alert. But having said that, I should say that people now will, even though supporters for Bo Xilai, when look at all these problems associated with crimes associated with Bo and his family, they will no longer support him. They will say what a hypocrisy, this kind of hypocrite Bo Xilai was and is. So that support will diminish significantly. And also those princelings, no one wants to be associated with him. They all want to keep distance with him. So basically, his power base really undermined in the recent development. But in terms of ideas, in terms of some of the justified issues for social justice and for equality, this kind of movement will continue. And certainly the leadership, whether Hu Jintao, Wen Jiabao, or upcoming leadership, should even more forcefully address these issues. Now, the second question about how could you do that at the time of the transition with all these challenges or possible danger of out of control. Yes, certainly this is a valid concern, and many leaders will use that as explanation. Now, here is my two answers. First of all, early on I mentioned in my overall assessment, compared with 1989 Tiananmen, Chinese society, Chinese economy have not been disrupted because of Bo Xilai. Now, this should give confidence for the public that the problems really rely on the Chinese Communist Party leadership, not necessarily reflect the problem in the society. So the weakness of the party not necessarily means the weakness of the country and or the problem of the Chinese society. So in that regard, that you can avoid all the myths that the instability probably will be challenged by some of the liberal intellectuals. But at the same time, I think it's really an issue that the legitimacy of the Chinese Communist Party with all these problems. Chinese Communist Party has been famous for a lot of bad things, but the assassination, murder is really exceptional. Now it reached that point. Now let's also remember that the triggering factor in Taiwan's transition for democracy was the assassination of a writer named Zhang Nan in the United States. Then Jiang Jingguo recognized that the Kuomintang lost the moral high ground. Therefore, he needs to lift the Dangjing and the Baojing, which means the one-party rule and also media censorship. Now, whether this will happen to China or not, is certainly no one knows. Only time can tell. But I think that you look at the Chinese discourse, even in the official media, in the recent People's Daily editorials, now call for rule of law, call for serious political reform. Wen Jiabao's remarks, in the final day of the National People's Congress, he emphasized the state and the party leadership reform. Really makes it very clear that China should rapidly move that direction. And certainly that the crisis gave him the more kind of political ammunition to argue in that line. And other leaders, maybe even those who previously opposed this kind of political reform or intra-party election, may feel this is the only choice they can go.
That analogy to Taiwan is a fascinating one. That is truly optimistic. I've spoken over the last several weeks with people from Liaoning and people from Chongqing, and there is significant support for Bo Xilai, and there is a level of incredulity about the charges. What are the chances, if this is the case? I mean, these are not insignificant places. What are the chances you think that this could spiral out of control, that the attempt to paint Bo as this evil character fails because, there have been other cases where Chinese media has misled the Chinese public and it doesn't have tremendous credibility with the Laobaixing, that basically people say, this guy's being railroaded and we should continue to support him?
Well, certainly, possibility exists. But I think that possibility is very slim. Now, this is all related with the fact that what charge the central leadership will place on Bo Xilai's case. Now, if the top leadership only use corruption to, purge Bo Xilai, that will resonate very, very badly because, according in the the Chinese public mind, that corruption is a widely spread phenomenon. So why single out Bo Xilai? But here, the case is quite extraordinary, and also that the death of Neil Hayward is only one of the cases under investigation, and Bo Xilai did have a bad reputation in terms of a lot of wrongdoings in Liaoning and Chongqing, and even many years ago, or even when he was Dalian mayor, there are a lot of widely spread rumors throughout the country about Bo Xilai's wrongdoings. So I think the government has a solid case to convince the people that these are real. But on the other hand, China is a big country. Always there's some people doubt the evidence. There's always some left-wing intellectuals or any people, even some people just wanted to see, to accelerate the end of the communist regime, may also wanted to spread the rumors and try to challenge the verdict and etc. But I think the most important thing is the majority people's view, whether Chinese Communist Party in general, the leadership, gave a convincing case to the public. Now, I think they have a good chance to do that. And again, that of course, that now we only talk about this single case, talk about Bo Xilai. There, in the coming months, that the country really will enter a very difficult period, uncertainties for the country. But let's just think that it is only this case for time being, for the coming months. I think the leadership has a good chance to overcome it, and also use that for for the input for something good.
Next question.
Thank you. Next question is from Susan Short from University of California.
Sorry that I hit the wrong button on my cell phone last time. Cheng, I wonder if you think there is any support for Bo Xilai, or has been previously, has there been support in the Standing Committee? And specifically, do you think the theory about support from Zhou Yongkang, that there could be anything to it?
Well, this is an excellent question, and of course, that I indicate that before Wang Lijun case, of course, Bo Xilai had much support from the other member of the Standing Committee, although that we need to make a distinction. Not all 5 Standing Committee members visited Chongqing necessarily support Bo Xilai. At least in my view, 2 leaders actually, their visit to Chongqing could be interpreted in somewhat different ways. One is certainly He Guoqiang. This is actually Steve mentioned earlier. He Guoqiang and Bo Xilai hated each other. How could you say that He Guoqiang's visit to Chongqing is an endorsement for Bo Xilai? Of course, Bo Xilai wants to use that look like an endorsement, but in reality, it's far from that. Maybe some of the deal should be made, or maybe He Guoqiang wanted to say something different, during that visit, or maybe He Guoqiang wants to get some leverage and etc. Now, the second case is Xi Jinping. Yes, Xi Jinping visited Chongqing in a very high-profile manner. But if you look at Xi Jinping's remarks in Chongqing, he actually said something quite subtle, and actually some non-official media or semi-official media immediately pick up in the following day after Xi Jinping's visit, saying that actually Xi Jinping urged Bo Xilai cool down and to respect the law rather than just pursue this kind of cultural revolution style campaign. Now, certainly, of course, this is subject to different interpretation. But anyway, that Bo Xilai did have support. Now, the question is that after Wang Lijun case, whether someone supported Bo Xilai, and Susan, you mentioned about Zhou Yongkang. Certainly, I noticed the widespread rumor about Zhou Yongkang. But let me say, first of all, that some rumors already proved to be wrong. Secondly, I would be surprised by some of the accusations that Bo Xilai and Zhou Yongkang wanted to undermine Xi Jinping, unless I missed something very, very important. It does not make sense to me when Bo Xilai really, and Xi Jinping come from the same printing background. Of course, they have tensions, but when you face serious challenges like from the Communist Youth League, usually they will come together. And by the way, that they all belong to Jiang Zeming's faction, and Jiang Zemin and Deng Qinghong are all heavyweight politicians. So Zhou Yongkang certainly part of that. So it does not make sense to me But I understand there's some rumors going on. But at this point, I'm a little bit cynical. But unless there's a strong evidence, even some of the rumors to be proved to be true, Zhou Yongkang is someone is going to leave after the 18th Party Congress. I don't think it's the leadership's interest to deal with that issue. And so far, I think that the leadership unity and rather than divide is the most important thing. I'm not saying that the leadership can maintain unity forever. I also think that they will face new challenges after 18th Party Congress. But at the moment, I do see the unity rather than vicious power struggle.
Do you think there is any truth to the thought that Bo Xilai was slated to replace Zhou Yongkang?
Well, no. I don't think this is even possible, because the things that, even when Bo Xilai was mayor of Dalian, it's widely spread that he bugged the conversation of the party secretary of Dalian at that time. I mean, if I knew that, all other leaders should have known this. I mean, there's a tremendous force will block his appointment as Zhou Yongkang's successor. This is very, very unlikely. It does not make sense to me at all. Now, even, of course, that I always thought that the Bo Xilai had 80% of chance to be a standing committee member, 80%, without the Wang Lijun case. When Wang Lijun case took place, it becomes 0. Now, but the 80% chance, he could only end up with some less important positions, like propaganda czar, like probably the chairman of the CPPCC, and so he has no chance to really become premier as he wants to other people to believe, and certainly no chance to be a person in charge of police and in charge of the discipline. He will use the entire machine for his sake. I mean, this is this speculation really, in my view, is an insult to the intelligence and of other leaders. I don't think this will happen, and this is even not an option.
Next question.
Thank you. As a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, just dial *1 to pose a question, and please limit your questions to one at a time. We will be joining in now for a question from William Cunningham, committee member.
Good afternoon. Early in your presentation, Dr. Li, you indicated that you believe that the leadership should move very quickly and briskly to clear this matter up and not wait for the transition to take place. But since then, you have indicated a number of caveats and reasons to hesitate, pressures that would militate against quick action. So what do you really expect to have happen?
Well, the leadership unity itself is an important development, and introduce some of the mechanism to for the inter-party election at the 18th Party Congress to regain the legitimacy and the confidence among the party members, among the general public, is very, very important. And some of the promises to deal with some of the policy issues, whether economic policies in terms of growing economic disparity, and also the privilege of the political elites, and the anti-corruption measure. All these things they need to do. Of course, you can say this is some of them are empty promises, but some of them are real. Let's see whether they will introduce more electoral mechanism for election, whether they will really handle Bo Xilai's case in a more legal manner rather than the campaign method. These things will be known in the next few months. So again, I did not say there's a constraint for quick move. I think I'm for quick move. I think that all the indications point out that they want to move very quickly. The fact that they announced that in a very decisive way, in a quick way, about first is that dismiss Bo Xilai's position in Chongqing, then within a month that also put a charge on Gu Kailai, his wife, and also remove his party Central Committee membership and the Politburo membership. These are all very decisive moves.
Next question.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Charles Wang from China AIDS Fund.
Charles here. How are you? Good to
Pretty good.
hear your
yes.
great presentation. My question is, from your assessment, what would be the worst or the best outcome for Bo Xilai? Would he at least just get a jail term, or he's going to be getting even harsher sentences?
The worst thing, probably in my view, is death penalty, but the commute to life sentence in prison, as happened to Chongqing and others. This is probably the worst scenario. The best is probably in a few years in prison. This is my assessment.
So you think he serves no matter what? They don't let this...
I think highly likely he will be in jail if you look at these charges. Because even the lowest charge so far now from the document released 2 or 3 days ago is go beyond that you made the wrong judgment in terms of personnel appointing Wang Lijun to be police chief. Now actually goes you violate party regulations. This itself could be quite serious charge, very much like the charges against Zhao Ziyang. But now look at his wife, look at the other possible cases, and I think it should be far more severe. And also, it is just not right, after 20-some years that with house arrest with Zhao Ziyang, you also do the same thing with Bo Xilai. And this is such a contradiction with the country, with the leadership who wants to emphasize rule of law and wants to emphasize of the legal procedures. So I think highly likely will be in jail term. And this is my quick reaction.
Next question.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Lyman Ben Slyke from Stanford University.
Thank you, Professor Li. Since I can ask only one question, I'll just ask, in terms of systemic operation of the party, would you care to compare and contrast the case of Bo Xilai with the case a few years ago of Chen Liangyu in Shanghai?
Yes, and in many ways that certainly there's some similarities because the person replaced Chen Liangyu was first Han Zheng, then Xi Jinping, then currently Yu Zhengsheng. All of these three people are Jiang Zeming's proteges, and including the member of Shanghai Gang. Now, I think in that regard it's similar because earlier I said that Zhang Dejiang, the person who replaced Bo Xilai, is also from Jiang Zeming's camp. Now, the difference is also very big. It's because Chen Liangyu's case is only related with corruption, and but Bo Xilai's case involves far more serious charge. But on both cases, you do see that the two competing factions or coalitions have cut the deal. Now, after the Bo Xilai case, some people said that this is a major blow for Princeling, or this means the end of the Princeling faction. I just don't buy that. I think if we really want to eliminate one coalition or one faction, just like China is in revolution, this is just incredible. I mean, the things. It's 10 times more than just a purge of Bo Xilai. I think that what I call the one faction, two coalition, that formula largely remain in the case of Chen Liangyu 6 years ago and the Bo Xilai case now. I'm not saying that it will remain forever. They need to change in the wake of Bo Xilai. But so far, we do see that that the balance, the delicate balance of power, largely remain. I think that actually is not necessarily bad for the time being. And so this is my answer to the similarity and the differences of these two cases.
Next question.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Peter Wolf from National Committee.
Hello. Thank you, Chen.
Yep.
I'm wondering if you would comment on the effect you think these events will have on the makeup of the Standing Committee and, to a lesser extent, the makeup of the Politburo going forward. if not in terms of specific individuals, in terms of which factions will have more of an upper hand in the composition, whether there'll be a prejudice against high-profile people like Bo Xilai, such as Bo Xilai was, or princelings in choosing members to begin next winter.
This question is very, very important, but I think that first of all, that at this point, still no one knows, even these leaders do not know. This is involved a complicated bargaining and a very complicated deal-making process. And this is not only related to the 9 people selected, but also involved with the role of Hu Jintao, whether he will remain as the chairman of the CMC, Central Military Commission, and also the remaining influence of some elderly leaders. These are all factors related. Having said that, I still believe that largely, if still 9 members, of course there's no law that there should be 9 members, could be 7, could be 11, and if that's the case, still will be relatively evenly distributed in terms of these top positions. And also, I believe that the immediate beneficiaries may not necessarily Communist Youth League faction or Wang Yang, because there's also component in terms of backlash. But now Wang Yang is on the spotlight. There's some forces will contain Wang Yang, Guangdong chief. He's a Communist Youth League official. His power and influence. And I also believe that in terms of individual leaders, probably the beneficiaries maybe come from the same faction. Zhang Dejiang, even without Bo Xilai, will have a standing committee membership seat. And the people like Zhang Gaoli, current Tianjin party chief, and Yu Zhengsen, current party chief in Shanghai, both are Jiang Zemin's proteges, have better chance to, have Bo Xilai's seat. But having said that, we early on mentioned the possibility of election methods used or introduced. If that is really introduced even in the election of the standing committee and or Politburo, and that will be another different game. So it's really beyond we cannot assess at the moment. But I think even there's an election, they will be always limited and also will be manipulated by through some of the other mechanisms. But if we introduce the election method, I think the result will be somewhat different. So this is my basic take for the excellent question. And but the bottom line is the factional balance of power, whether through the election or not through election, will largely remain. But the personnel on the standing committee depend on many, many factors.
The U.S. government seems to have done a magnificent job in not leaking one word of what went on when Wang Lijun was in the consulate in Chengdu. Do you see any implications of this entire event for U.S. China relations?
Well, of course, that is very. I think first I praise the U.S. government not leaking any information, and also by the fact that we do not directly involve with Chinese domestic politics, and sometimes could be very counterproductive. And also certainly the fact that Wang Lijun defected to the U.S. and Bo Xilai, a person really represents some ultra-nationalist view, actually did all these awful things. These all just undermine the so-called conspiracy theory led by the United States. But on the other hand, there are always people criticize the United States for one way or another. But I think the real challenge probably is yet to come. I think we do need to, if my analysis above is right, I think we should revisit some of our policies towards China and how to prepare some kind of drastic changes in the Chinese political system in the near future. And this is also important. And also handle the Bo Xilai, some of the related issues. And but yes, you're right. There's no major leak. But some of our leaders' comments on the Wang Lijun went there, based on appointment, long-time appointment, a regular visit, that actually did not resonate well among the Chinese public. They thought it was a joke. It was embarrassment on part of the United States.
Interesting. I think our 1 hour has run, so I'm going to have to end it here. I apologize to those who have not gotten to ask their questions. Cheng, can you give them your email? Do you mind saying that?
I'm overwhelmed by the.
You're overwhelmed by email, so you need not do that.
But yes, for the committee, 100 committee. For the National Committee members, my answer is yes. But my answer will be very brief. I really forgive myself because I'm overwhelmed by the request.
Yes. You have done a magnificent job in kind of laying out what has happened where there's so much speculation and so much not known.
I want to add one more thing. I will have a major piece published by Yale Global. It's not about what I said. Almost none of the things I said today actually in that article, but it's about the broad trends in Chinese politics and Chinese society. It will be the Yale Global. It will be posted next Monday. But also I will have an extensive interview with NBR on the Boshila episode, and a lot of details also differ from what I said today.
Mm-hmm. There is an when will that be broadcast?
NBR, no, I'm sorry, not NPR. National Bureau of Asia Research. Some of the members probably on the call. They did an excellent job, interview. It will be a long interview, longer than this one, about the Boshila episode, with a lot of details. Yes. It will be posted probably next Tuesday. The Yale Global article will be posted Monday.
Well, again, thank you so much for giving of your time, and this was terrific. And thank everybody for joining us on this call.
Thank you. This doesn't conclude our teleconference for the day. You may now disconnect.